Are we desensitized as a nation, as a people? I have a video on YouTube, one of my earliest postings, where I responded to a woman getting tased. I saw it at about the time that the University of Florida student was tased at a John Kerry rally speech, and I was shocked at how many people sat in the crowd and watched it happen. Numbed, I would say, almost from the terror of this happening. And so I wonder, I posted in that first video some ideas about how we can watch this woman screaming, screeching in pain, and almost take pleasure from it. You know, a sadistic kind of S&M pleasure out of that woman being tased. She was screeching and crying and all these things. And most of the comments that I got, you can see them, they're available for public view. Most of the comments had to do with, she should have done X, Y, and Z. She should have gotten out of the car immediately. Did she have her license in order, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some people acknowledged that there may have been a racial component to to how this driver was perceived. Perhaps she was seen as a threat more immediately. These are things that we can all speculate on, and as you can see from the comments on that posting, many people have speculated. But the one thing that really, really, really surprises me is the faith, the sort of blind faith that we have in the system. We sort of, all the comments seem to assume that if we all do the right thing, then we won't ever have to suffer. And this is interesting because we in our nation, above any other nation perhaps, but as an American I can say that we know that doing the right thing doesn't always get the right results. On a sort of a national scale, I can look at people who've always been sort of counterculture, and they've been doing what they felt was the right thing. Look at the abolitionists. Look at the Quakers. Look at the people who resisted slavery. They were in the wrong in their day. And I'm not saying that this woman that was being tased was somehow fighting for some cause. What I am saying is that we know as Americans that we cannot have blind faith in the system to work for us. Most of us are ready to accept that we live in a very racist nation. And we've started to hear the term driving while black. And so we also understand that perhaps there's a racial component, a racialized component to how we perceive one another. And our reticence to discuss anything about the legacy of slavery really shows a lack of maturity around the issue. And it's like when we talk about racism, we have to sort of, we're all put on guard. As if somebody's going to be blamed, somebody's going to be held responsible, accountable. And it's just a very uncomfortable discussion. And we are very uncomfortable with any kind of dialogue that might sort of point to our own culpability. Now, when I talk about being desensitized to these things, to violence especially, I look at how much violence there is in this nation. I look at how polite we are to one another in mixed spaces, and we just acknowledge that we don't have to talk about certain things, which is a kind of passive aggressiveness, very violent. I look at the guns that we have in our society. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, take a crash course and just watch Michael Moore's movie, Roger and Me, or Bowling for Columbine, or you can see how violent our society is. And there are just guns, 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 and more guns. And then you look at the video games. I mean, I grew up on Atari and Pac-Man, chomping these, mythical-looking, bots crunching around on each other. But here now you have, there's that one scene that everyone has seen where you have the fighting, and then they're ripping this man's head off or this woman's head off, and the entire spine comes out and it's just bloody. And this is the kind of violence that people are exposed to. Have you ever been to a Hollywood movie and not seen someone just get slapped around, beat around? Harrison Ford, Arnold Schwarzenegger, slapped around, slapping someone, beating someone, shooting someone, and coming happily home to their middle class white environment, upper middle class white environments. And it's just shocking how much violence we see in our society, so much so that when we go to war and when we hear about casualties of war and insurgents, we fail to remember that these are people who actually suffered. When we talk about the civil rights movement earlier last year, there was a lot of talk about 50 years after the integration of Little Rock Public Schools, and there was Bill Clinton, promoting his wife, and there were, the survivors of that terrorism, of those mothers coming to yell at them, spit at them, children that we put on the front lines to integrate our schools. And I'm from Kentucky. We are on the front lines, and children are always placed on that battlefield. And so we are a very violent society, and we learn this from childhood. And so putting video games in front of children only prepares them to accept war as a way of life, to accept an invasion of a sovereign nation as a way of life, as a means to achieve peace. And of course, we've seen the saying, fighting for wars like fucking for virginity, and it just can't happen. It can't happen. And so I think a lot about where we are as a consumerist society and where compassion comes in. We consume things, and the comments that I've seen on that YouTube video have just been shocking to me. We all expect that we can just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and that the playing fields are all level, and that they're not level for anyone. None of us. Not anyone who is poor, regardless of your skin color. Not anyone who is wealthy. The playing field is not level, and so we can no longer pretend that we live in a meritocratic society. We don't. Things are not equal, and we have to really start to evaluate and have an open dialogue about the social situation. And if we don't, we will just be consumers, filling ourselves with the belief that if we all just adhere to, getting more money and working hard, then everything will be okay. This can't work. And there are two things that I point to that really make this blow up in our faces. One, the spread of religious fundamentalism and the emptiness that people feel in their lives. Because if we all buy into consumerism, we just consume, we don't actually have anything. We just have the ability to consume. If you look at post-Katrina, when Walmart reached survivors with clean water before any government body, anyone who, any guardian of the public good could reach these people who had suffered in this massive, natural disaster that was largely caused by our own greed, the offshore drilling, the lack of public accountability and reinforcing levies. These things had been allowed to go on for years, but as consumers, in New Orleans and in Louisiana, the better consumers had the better neighborhoods in the Garden District, and the consumers who had property to protect in the French Quarter. But those people in the lower Ninth Ward, they weren't great consumers, and therefore they weren't great public citizens. As Toni Morrison said in that conversation that you can find on Democracy Now! With Cornel West, Bush asked us to go shopping. She said she was looking for some mayor guy or some political guy to say, go check on your neighbors, go, check on your family, make sure everybody's okay. No, they didn't say that. They said, go shopping, go back to the airports, and let's show these terrorists of 9/11 that we won't be shaken. Go back and invest in the market. And it's a true American tradition. If you look at the day after Thanksgiving, what we do, that day after Thanksgiving, when we go out and start shopping to celebrate Jesus' birthday, we totally forget about peace. We totally forget about reconciliation. We totally forget about forgiveness, and we all just adhere to the market values. Even under the guise of Christianity or any formalized system of faith in America, it seems to be, largely trumped